You probably at Beer Center each week. Ralph Club, biggest contributor. Yeah, answer that.
I like beer. I don't know if you like Beer Center or not. What do you like to drink?
Next week.
I had one beer Friday.
Hanging out and having some beers with friends, which I gladly do and which I fully embrace.
Well, you think it was... Nope, it was one beer. Friday.
Let's hear the chorus. When you say put, you say it all.
Yes, indeed. Thank the Lord for Friday and for beer, because we all could use a one beer Friday. You know, there are many things that have been closed down for very good reason. There are many things that have been stopped in our country, but this is one thing that is not stopped. Oh, by the way, and another thing that is not stopped is the Unsportsmanlike Conduct Golf League.
Yeah.
There are still some entries available right now at miraclehillgolf.com. Yes, they're going to do all the social distancing, and golf is the ultimate social distancing sport, especially if you golf like me, because unless there's a problem getting COVID from the weeds and the trees that are off the fairway, I'm going to be fine. But that was a joke on my game.
I was smiling. Sorry, I should have laughed because we are still on the radio. I thought that was very funny because I'm the exact same way. If you play with me, just don't hit it in the trees, and we're going to avoid each other very, very, very
Did I ever tell you the story about how I lost 13 golf balls in the first 3 holes once?
Holy
no.
moly, that's good.
True story. Hillcrest used to be called Hillcrest. I don't know what it's called anymore in Fremont, just north of Platte River, or south of the Platte River. It's got to be your bowl. First 3 holes. Shank, could not find them. I was so angry. I almost gave up golf the rest of my life after that. It was terrible. But we still have entries into the Unsportsmanlike Conduct Golf League. So go to miraclehillgolf.com. Everyone will have their own cart. Again, social distancing, all of that stuff will be observed. And yet we can still have the same kind of fun that the guys had last year in the golf league. So miraclehillgolf.com. There's just a very few entries left, and they're starting in only a couple of weeks, I think, right?
Yes, it's starting on Wednesday, May the 6th. It's crazy that it will be May 1 week from today. It will be Wednesday nights. It'll be 6 p.m. All summer long. It's going to be absolutely awesome.
So there you have it. And with no further ado, One Beer Friday is on the air. Yes, we are, and we welcome in live outdoors from O'Neill, Nebraska, our good friend Jim, who emailed us a couple of weeks ago and wanted to be part of this virtual One Beer Friday. Jim, how you doing? How's life up in great north central Nebraska?
You know, it's not too bad. Doing pretty well. Weather's gorgeous out here. Just standing outside drinking my Busch Light.
Oh, see, he's going Busch Light. Josh, what do you got today?
I am enjoying a double dry hopped fairy nectar, of course, from our friends at Cross Train, but you got to check out my glass that I am enjoying this in with the old school football logo helmet and a bunch of hops as well. Yeah.
Ooh.
I will send you the link, Stibbs. I got it from my brother a couple of months ago. He found them randomly online. He sent it to me, and I immediately bought 4 of them. They are.
I am buying some of those.
Yeah, they are.
That is fantastic.
Now,
I'm going with something different this week. I'm going to go with some. Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong thing. Hold on. I'm sorry. I'm going with my Deschutes fresh squeeze. I just reached down blindly, and I mean, they felt the. I mean, look at them. They look pretty much the same. They feel the same.
For injecting, not ingesting.
Yeah, John. He said inject it. Don't drink it. Inject it. That was well.
I mean, if we can't have fun with that, I don't know what else.
I almost, when I had my lunch today, I almost had a picture of Clorox next to it, and I almost tweeted it out, but I didn't want my mentions to be miserable all day long, so I decided.
We're having fun. Hey, so So, Jim, tell us about what you do, because you've emailed us many times on the program, but you're one of our fine educators out there.
Yeah, I'm an elementary school principal. I've been doing it for 10 years now.
What have things been like in O'Neill? I mean, obviously, we're familiar with what's happening in eastern Nebraska. The schools have been closed now for over a month now. How difficult has it been for you to work there in the O'Neill Public Schools, coordinating with everybody and trying to make sure that some online learning, if possible, can happen?
You know, it's been difficult. The teachers have done a really good job, and so have the kids and parents. But it's been a learning process. We got ahead of it a little bit because we had the governor and the commissioner 2 weeks before everything started happening, started informing us of what was going on. So me being the jerk boss I am, told my teachers they had to have 2 weeks worth of lesson plans ready for every kid, just in case we closed the next day. And I hope they'll thank me now that that's a little less work on the front end. But
Jim,
yeah.
Have there been, I mean, we're all trying to find silver linings and everything, right? Like, have you or any of your employees, the other teachers, have you found any of those silver linings with the school from home and all that stuff?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily a silver lining, but I think we went content over curriculum, which means we're letting the teachers take what, the standards, rather than teaching what's in our book or what's in the website that we use to teach all the kids. They're able to use a little bit more of their creativity, and the teachers have enjoyed doing those things. And some of the activities the kids are seeing, our social media presence has been pretty cool with kids and parents communicating with us. We've liked it a lot. So I hope that they'll keep using it.
Yeah. How hard has O'Neill and the O'Neill area been hit? I know some of the rural counties haven't had many cases yet, just because there hasn't been as much contact. But how is the community getting along in this time of COVID-19?
We're pretty lucky. They just did testing here in O'Neill, and they did over 100 tests and 0. So that's good. And we're one of the health districts. We just got an email from our health district saying that on May 4th they're going to start lightening things, and we're one of the ones that gets to have things lightened. I think haircuts, and I think that the restaurants can be open with X number of patrons and stuff. So I think that'll be good. And I just think Nebraskans, one of you said it before, Nebraskans just follow the rules. Like, even though they might not like it, people are trying to do the best to follow the rules. And I think the hardest part for us has been our neighborhood's full of kids. I got 4 of them sitting here jumping on my trampoline, and about 30 feet away from that are 5 more kids, and they just go stand on the tree lines and talk to each other 6 feet away. But I tell you what, when they're told.
That has been the thing I've noticed, when I take Wrigley for a walk, or even just being here in my neighborhood, one of the things I used to lament was, the kids don't play outside anymore. And if there's been a benefit to this in being, more homebound, it's that we've had to get a little more creative, and kids are going outside again. And I don't know what it's like in your guys' neighborhoods, but the sidewalk chalkers are they're just painting up the neighborhoods. I mean, and there's so many beautiful messages of hope and inspiration. And so I'm glad that the art teachers, it appears like, Jim, the art teachers have gotten their assignments out, because the sidewalk chalk has been busy.
Yeah, that's actually next week for our school. We always do a mission. And next week's mission, we're supposed to have our art show next week. So we're going to ask the kids to either draw on their windows or draw your sidewalk chalk on their on their sidewalk or their driveways, and just to have our school art show. And there's already a bunch of stuff out now, but it'll be just one reason the kids get out there. I know last week our neighbor, their little kids, they wrote "Coronavirus sucks" huge letters on their driveway. But
I actually saw one sign in a window that I thought I would never see, or at least, I certainly would have never imagined doing it when I was a kid. But there was a little sign. It was a little handmade, crayon sign that said, "I want my school back." And I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
The kids, we keep talking about how kids, always want to be out and not going to school. But I think we found out here, being out prematurely like this, that kids really enjoy the experience, the communal experience of being together at school.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Jim, you don't have to give specifics, obviously, but one of the things that we've, of course, spent so much time talking about is football, if it will return, and the planning that goes into that. What are the discussions like for the fall, and what things could look like, and all of the, just everything that kind of encapsulates that?
We actually just talked about the fall, and all that we really talked about was that we need some guidance from the governor, I guess, and because it seems like things change weekly, and I'm not trying to sidestep the question, but if you were to ask me to prognosticate, I'm willing to bet if there are games that it's like the state tournament and it's just immediate families and they're sitting in pods. I might be wrong. I'm hoping that I am wrong because I coached football for 10 years and I can't do that anymore since I'm an administrator. And I live for going on Friday nights and taking my boys to the games and watching them. So I hope that we can.
Well, Jim joins us in our virtual One Beer Friday. And again, we invite everybody to tweet out their pics of what they're enjoying. Jim's got a Busch Light. I've got my Deschutes. I didn't have Stibbs. Stibbs has been busy. He doesn't drink while he drives, which is good.
Well, definitely not while he drives.
We don't have much. I looked in the fridge. There's a couple left that I'm not too keen on. So
I think we're going to have to. Oh, Coke Zero.
Coke Zero, very on brand.
We're going to have to. We did such a great job there for a while of getting people to bring us beers, even though they were unsolicited. We might need to do a mercy mission for Stibbs to replenish that refrigerator because we're not there anymore. So it's all Stibbs. He's all by himself.
Exactly. And like usually it was you or I, John, that would bring stuff in just because Stibbs has so much other things going on in the building. And so, yeah, we're not there. We're literally not there anymore because the last few weeks, it's just him and I. And so I'd be like, all right, I'll bring a couple of things from my stash. Sorry, Stibbs. At least you got your Coke Zero.
No, I'm good. Yeah, I mean, I didn't always participate, even if I said I did. So.
Well, Jim, we bring you into our virtual One Beer Friday room, and one of the things we like to do is just have a good old-fashioned conversation, the kind that we might have sitting around the bar enjoying a beverage or two. And we may have actually stumbled on one earlier in the show when we were talking about how this football season might end up looking like the old school football seasons, where we don't have a national championship game. We just have a bunch of teams just playing whoever they can, and we end up voting on the champion at the end of the season. And then I said, if that happens, we need to make sure that Lee Barfneck of the World Herald, formerly of the World Herald, gets the vote. He infamously, of course, voted Michigan number 1 in 1997 over Nebraska. And then Josh thought I was defending Michigan for being number
Big
1.
Michigan guy.
So 1997. Let's take up the argument. Should Nebraska have stolen half a national championship away from Michigan?
I'm not much older than Josh. That was really the first national championship I remember. I remember the 94 and 95, my dad screaming at the TV, being all excited, but 97 is that first throne I remember. And now that I'm an adult and I look back on it, even though I think Nebraska deserved it, I wonder if T.O. wouldn't have been in his last year if we wouldn't have won, which I think is crap. But I maybe Michigan probably.
No, it's funny you say that, Jim. Like if you move away from the actual matchup between those two schools, I do think the sympathy. I don't want to call it sympathy vote, but I do think that him retiring played a big part in Tom Osborne winning it from the coach's perspective. And I think they know what goes into it and they understand all of how hard it is. And so I definitely think that played a big part in him winning that side of the vote. And if he doesn't announce his retirement, I do wonder if we're talking about Michigan being the consensus national champion in both polls.
No, I don't think there's any doubt. And if you want to put the tinfoil hat on, and we all got our ball caps on, but if we wanted to make them tinfoil hats, you could say that maybe Osborne timed this just in the perfect nick of time to get that sympathy vote. Because remember, Nebraska trailed in both polls going into that game, and I can't remember what the exact margin was, but it was a fairly decent margin, the coach's vote. And then the game happened, and they got just enough votes to jump Michigan and win that title. I just remember back to that weekend, and I know we talk a lot about the Matt Davison catch, the game at Missouri, and how important that was. But if you'll recall, that exact same weekend was Michigan and Penn State.
Yep, and they killed them.
Michigan went on the road to Penn State, and ESPN was promoting it as Decision Saturday or some weird thing.
Florida State played North Carolina too. They were both undefeated as well.
Right, and Michigan went in, and really it was their one really impressive. Well, they really had two impressive wins. They blew out Colorado in the first game when Colorado was in the top 10.
Yep.
Yeah. And then they blew out Penn State 34-8 at Penn State. But then you look at the rest of their games, they were close for the most part. Whereas Nebraska, they had the one slip up. And I think a lot of the momentum, and I don't think this gets talked enough. The Nebraska had some decent momentum to being ranked number 1, and then the Missouri game happened, and Missouri wasn't a great team. They were good, but they weren't great. And the same weekend that Michigan blows out Penn State on the road, which is a tough place to win, Nebraska has to use this fluke play to just eke out a win in overtime against Missouri. And I think that started a narrative for the rest of the season that, Nebraska's not that good. But when you look at it in totality, that team dominated some teams that year. And I thought, when you put the seasons back side to side, I think Nebraska looks a lot better than Michigan in terms of the quality of teams that they beat and how they beat them.
So I'm looking at the week by week. Oh, sorry, Jim, you go ahead.
I think Charles Woodson has something to do with it too. Like, that guy was a generational player, and it was his team that was going up against it. I think if Nebraska had been the team, let's say it was Tommy Frazier, and Scott Frost is really, really good. I'm not saying that. Let's say it's Tommy Frazier as the quarterback, and he's in the Heisman hunt. Then I think that changes the national narrative too, because I think Nebraska was a combination of a bunch of dudes that were just at the top of their game, but none of them were, Heisman Trophy guys. And then you had Charles Woodson over here, who's playing, he's returning punts, he's playing defense, he's scoring touchdowns on offense. I think that mattered too. I mean, optics did matter even in '97.
No, they definitely did. And it's funny, John, I'm looking at the week by week, and this is according to Wikipedia, so there might be some, mistakes in here. I'm guessing they're not. Going into the Missouri game, Nebraska had 50 first-place votes. Florida State had 2. Penn State had 8. Michigan had 2. Florida State beats North Carolina. Nebraska almost loses to Missouri, and Michigan destroys Penn State. The very next week, Nebraska dropped from 50 first-place votes to 16, and that number got as low as 4. I'm pretty sure it was after the Colorado game, which was another one where they got up big and Colorado came back. And by that point, Colorado was a 500 team. Nebraska had 8.5 first place votes. So some coward out there wouldn't decide on, who was the actual best team in the country going into bowl season. And then they got the win, and Nebraska barely squeaked them out with 32 first place votes versus 30 for Michigan. So, you can really see it. Nebraska had a ton of respect, after that Washington win, and it just kept climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing until that weekend when they almost lost to Missouri, and it just dropped, and it basically stayed that way for the final month and a half of the year.
And if you recall, wasn't that the Colorado game that Nebraska almost blew?
Yeah, I think they were up by 3.5 touchdowns, and Colorado came back. Basically, it was like a precursor to the 1999 game, where Nebraska blew that one. I think they won 27-24. They held on at the very end. But by that point, Colorado, they started out, as you just said, John, they started out 7th or 8th in the country in the AP poll, but they got killed by Michigan. They lost back-to-back games in the middle of the year to Texas A&M and Oklahoma State, and then they never got back inside the top 25. They finished 5-6. And so by the time that Nebraska game happens, they're playing for bowl eligibility, and they weren't a good team. And yet it was funny. That game worked in the favor of Michigan in 2 ways. One, it was a top 10 win, and then in the other, they blew them out. And so they had 2 things on Nebraska because that was the only common opponent. I'm pretty sure Baylor might have been another common opponent that year, but no, never.
Yes,
yeah.
Baylor was a common opponent. That was the game too for Michigan, and they beat Baylor at home 38-3. And Nebraska went on the road and beat Baylor a couple of weeks later, 49-21.
Yeah.
So from the head-to-head perspective, Michigan's got a slight edge because they beat Colorado handily. But remember, Nebraska was winning that game handily, and then they let Colorado get back into it, and Colorado had an onside kick at the end to try to get it, and it didn't work out. But if you look at what Nebraska did against ranked opponents that year, remember that was the big Scott Frost game. They went to Washington and they won handily. They beat Kansas State badly at home by 30 when Kansas State was top 25, and then the last 2 games, Texas A&M, they were number 14 in the Big 12 championship, and Texas A&M got crushed. 54-15, and then of course the game against Peyton Manning in Tennessee. And I don't know, Jim, if that gets talked about enough. You mentioned Charles Woodson. Well, the 2 guys fighting for the Heisman that year were Charles Woodson and Peyton Manning. And Nebraska blew out Peyton Manning, and Manning didn't have a great game in his final college game. And I think for the Michigan people who get upset at how it's the whole Osborne thing as to why they got voted number one, I don't know if they're looking honestly enough at the fact that in the last game for Peyton Manning, the Heisman Trophy candidate, he got torched by the Huskers.
He did, and I want to say, didn't Michigan, when they were playing Washington State, they spiked the ball?
Yep.
And I remember thinking that Washington State should have had another play.
Yes.
And I think if that game happens in 2007 or 2017 in the Twitter era, people are going nuts. I think Matt Brown doing the one, doing this. I can't remember who the Washington State head coach was, but they probably should have had another shot at that.
They should have. There was a second left on the clock. It was so weird that they didn't give him another play.
Yeah,
you don't know if that's the Rose Bowl. Tinfoil hat, Rose Bowl bowing down to the blue blood Michigan. You never know, but yeah.
Well, I think we're all in consensus that Nebraska earned that part of the national title. I think it would have been a fun game if they could have played that game. And of course we're biased, but I think Nebraska wins that game. I thought the way Nebraska ended that season, they were on such a roll that, especially that defense, Brian Greasy against that defense, I'm sorry. I don't see it happening.
John, I got a question for you, and you can include Nebraska versus Michigan, or you can go with another one. You lived through a lot of split national championships. Which game do you think would have been the most fun of the split championships that we have had of course, the last one now is LSU USC almost 2 decades ago now. Is there one that you think of that rises above the fray that you really would have loved to see? Especially, the early 90s had back-to-back years, right, with split national titles.
Yeah, because you had Miami, Washington, right?
Yep.
And then the next year was Colorado,
Georgia Tech,
or maybe I flip-flopped.
I think you flipped. Yeah, I think
Colorado.
Yeah.
It was
first.
Wasn't it Washington and Colorado?
Ooh, yeah. Maybe we're mixing them up. Let me go look real fast.
You might be right.
Washington play Colorado?
No, we've got the right 4 teams. I'm trying to. For some reason, I thought it was Colorado and Georgia Tech.
Okay, it was. Yeah, Colorado and Georgia Tech in 1990, and then
because Nebraska lost to both of them.
That's right. And then the next year was Miami, Washington.
Right.
And then the next one was Nebraska, Michigan, and then we had the USC LSU one.
Honestly, I think the Nebraska Michigan one would have been the most interesting.
Yeah, me too.
Because that Washington team was really good against Miami of the day. I think they could have put together a good game, but I don't know. I just think that seeing Nebraska and Michigan would have been a blast and might have given us the best game, though. Again, Brian Greasy against that team, against Christian Peter or Jason Peter and Grant Wistrom. No.
Agreed.
No chance.
I watched a lot of Brian Greasy in my day. He was not good.
Hey, on that note, Stibbs, I have a green screen, and I was going to have my Chiefs logo on the back, and I'm like an old school Chiefs fan, like I thought Steve Bono was gonna do it, like he was gonna take him. So I'm not one of the bandwagon fans, but I was afraid you'd just not let me out of the backstage area, so I went outside instead.
That's exactly.
Oh, you don't know how awesome. You don't know how many people in this part of the state would have marked out if you would have had a Chiefs logo.
It would have been a lot.
It would have been funny.
How did you become a Chiefs fan?
TV. That was the game that was always on. And
when did Satan visit you and decide to make you a Chiefs fan?
Yeah. I don't know. My dad kind of rooted for him. My dad's a Redskins fan, but they weren't on very much, so he kind of adopted the Chiefs, and I just always watched them. And I just remember thinking every quarterback that came along, this is the one. Like when they got Alex Smith, I remember I was walking around with my chest puffed out, this is it. And then it wasn't. So
you had to wait for the next guy.
Yeah.
Now, did you grow up in O'Neill, or where did you grow up?
No, I grew up in York, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a York Duke, and
oh yeah,
I grew up, and I was a Chiefs and a Royals fan. So these last, from about 2014 on, has been pretty freaking awesome.
What is the because I lived for a little while in Norfolk, and we were in kind of the Sioux City sphere of influence as far as like media. Where do you get your television from in O'Neill?
We actually, I don't know why, but O'Neill goes south, and we get Kearney, Lincoln, and like that Hastings station.
Okay,
that's where we get ours from. And to be honest, and then we have that news channel in Nebraska who does a really good job of covering us, like.
Western Nebraska.
Yeah, Western Nebraska.
I had to get it in.
Hey, you're a teacher. Would you please explain to Josh where Western Nebraska is?
Oh, yeah, I know. I get it. Whatever. But no. So like our high school team doesn't get covered very often unless it's News Channel Nebraska. Like our basketball girls were, like I think they had 3 or 4 losses up until the very end of the season, and hardly got any TV action, but that's the way it is, So out here in Western Nebraska, I mean, I ride my horse to school. So.
We know better than that.
Yes.
Well, Jim, we've really appreciated you joining us here, and sounds like the kids are having a great time.
Yes.
Whatever they're doing.
They're jumping on the trampoline and trying to jump over their sister. So.
Do you have to like police them as far as not doing any WWE wrestling moves or stuff like that? Because I know that's tempting.
Yes, they like to be ninjas occasionally, and my 3 boys all wrestle. So I would say from November until about March, that happens on the mat, not on the floor in the living room, and yeah. So that it just is what it is, and then occasionally Big Sister comes in and punches them and reminds them who's older and who's bigger.
Well, Jim, we really appreciate you joining us. Thanks for being a great listener there in North Central Nebraska.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
And we always appreciate getting emails from you, and keep doing a great job for those kids. I know it's hard right now for the educators, and we wish everybody up there in O'Neill good luck.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
You bet. Jim. There he is. That's Jim, our great friend of the program, joining us live outdoors from O'Neill, Nebraska. When we come back, El Kent Wogelmont's going to join us. We'll go into the El Kent Movie Club, and Josh and Stibbs will crap all over John Wayne. Next on The Zone.